So your notes tonight for homework are the constant of proportionality and the equation y equals kx. A directly proportional relationship has a linear equation in the form of y equals kx. So there are a couple things that we are familiar with, proportional relationships. So proportional relationships are like what we studied with scale drawings, similar figures. So there's a proportional relationship. There's a ratio that's consistent. Also, it's a linear equation. In the word linear, you see line. So when you graph it, it's going to make a straight line. And it's always going to look like this. Y equals something times k. And the something is the constant ratio between x and y. So, if you think about it a different way, if you have y equals kx, and I want to know, well, how do I get k? How can I get the k by itself? Well, I'm multiplying k times x, so I could divide by x, divide by x. Anything divided by itself is 1. So k, the constant, is the ratio between y and x. So the ratio between y and x is called, I'm going to say, the constant of proportionality. Proportionality. And is represented by the variable k. Okay, so this is how this works. If you want to find the constant of proportionality, if you want to find k, how are x and y changing proportionally, you can find the unit rate. So try to fit unit rate in this space. Unit rate for the problem by evaluating the ratio of y to x. And we'll do this in an example in a minute. And assign that value to the variable k. Determine the independent and dependent variables for the problem. The independent variable is the variable x, and the dependent variable is the variable y. So in other words, as I change x, y will change because x changed. And we'll discuss that in the next example that we do. And the last thing, you put in the form of y equals kx. These are the steps. These are the steps that you take. So write an equation that will model the proportional relationship given in each graph below. And explain what the equation means in a statement. So here you go. We have a graph. And this is sugar to number of cups. And I can make a table from this. The x is always along here. And the y is always the value here. So when x is 0, y is 0. This point is the origin, 0, 0. When x is 4, y is 20. When x is 8, y is 40. And you can finish filling this in. 12, 60, 16, 80, and you can go 20 to 100. So if you haven't, make that table now. And now we're going to try to determine what is the constant. How is y changing as x is changing? Well, I can make a ratio. 20 over 4. 40 over 8. 60 over 12. I can put every y over its x value, and they should all reduce to the same thing. Well, what is 20 over 4? What is 20 divided by 4? It's 5. 5 or 5 to 1. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 12 goes into 60 5 times. And if I do 80 over 16 and 100 over 20, all of these are going to have the same amount. That's why it's called a constant. It remains the same. Even though the x may change and the y may change, this ratio is always the same. This is k. And this is what I use in my equation. So that is k. So my equation is y equals 5 times x. Any number that you put in for x, if you multiply times 5, you will get the y. This is just like this. This is how the equations look when it's a constant proportionality. It's y equals something times x, and the something is that ratio that you get when you divide your y values by your x values. It should always be the same. If it's not always the same, then it's not a proportional relationship. You're always going to have the same unit rate. To find that constant, that's going to be your k value in your equation. Your equation is going to be linear, which means it makes a straight line, and it's always going to go through the origin. To be proportional, constant proportionality, your graph has to be straight and it has to go through 0, 0. Because when you put 0 in for x, and I do 0 times 5, that should equal 0. Okay? So I want you to try this example. I want you to make a table, just like we did for the last one, and put in your x and y values. When x is this, what is y? When x is this, what is y? Fill this in. Divide each of your y's by your x's and find that constant ratio and write your equation y equals kx, but the k is going to be what you're getting when you're dividing each of those y's times the x. I want you to try that now. We will check the answer to this when you come into class tomorrow. We're going to be looking to see that your x's and y's are filled out, that you have the ratio, and that you were able to write an equation. Okay, so example 2. Write an equation that will model the proportional relationship given in each real-world situation. So it says there are 3 cans that store 9 tennis balls. Consider, this means think, about the number of balls in each can. So we're going to make a ratio. You're going to make a ratio. The tennis balls to the cans. And I want you to put in the numbers, the information that they gave you here to make this ratio. Once you make the ratio, I want you to simplify it to lowest terms so that for 1 can, how many balls are in 1 can? We'll check that when you come in. Once you get this, this helps you to answer this one. Because once you get that ratio down to 1, then you can write a y equals kx. But instead of k, you're going to write what this constant is. Y equals something times x. So we're going to check this, that you have an equation here. You have some number for k here, and you got that number by making this chart and dividing your y's by your x's until you see that you get the same number. And we're going to check this, that you use 3 cans to 9 tennis balls. You wrote it as a ratio. You reduced it down to the unit rate, how many tennis balls for 1 can, and you use that constant to write an equation here.